All right, come on, Bayside. How y'all doing today? Hey, come on, you can do better than that. Let's give it up for all of our campuses that are watching right now and everyone watching online. Come on, Bayside, you can do better than that. Wow. And hey, come on, why don't you all keep it going for Jesus this morning? Come on, make even more noise for Jesus today. Awesome. Wow. Well, my name is Joe, and I'm the student pastor here at our East Bradenton campus. It is such an honor to be here with you all today. I want to say a very special thank you to Pastor Randy and his wife, Amy, as well as our campus pastor, Bernard, here. Thank you guys so much for believing in me. I love y'all so much. And also want to say a big thank you to my wife, Shauna. Come on, y'all give it up for my wife, Shanae, here with us. We love you. I actually got a picture of my wife and our daughter that I want to show you in case you did. This is my wife, Shauna, our daughter, Grace. Grace is going to be 2 in January. And then I got another picture just of Grace here. Come on. Look at the picture. Hey, y'all got to do better than that. Come on. If I wanted to show you guys pictures of Grace, because if I don't show you pictures of Grace or post pictures of her on my social media, people get really, really upset. And I get lots of hate text messages like, why aren't you posting pictures of Grace on your social media? I'm like, well, it's my social media. They're like, well, we don't care about that. We just want to see pictures of your daughter. But I'm so excited to be here with you all today. How many parents do we have in the house? Where are my parents at? Come on, awesome, awesome. Where are my grandparents at today? Come on, wow, okay, awesome. At all of our locations for your grandparent. Now, wherever you're watching this, if you're a grandpa, would you put both of your hands up? Let's give it up for all the grandpas that are with us. Come on, grandpas. Come on. Hey, y'all, hey. You deserve a round of applause for not killing your kids. And the reward for that is God has given you grandchildren. Come on, somebody. But you know, the thing that I've discovered about being a grandpa, I'm not a grandpa, but the thing I've learned about grandpas is that you've got it pretty good. And here's what I mean by that. If you're a grandpa, you can get away with things that dads cannot get away with. Here's what I mean by that. If you're a grandpa and you have the grandbabies over to your house, you can give the grandbabies all the sugar at your house. Come on, cookies, donuts, come on, juice that's not watered down. It's got all the stuff in it, right? Like mom may be on this, I'm not giving him sugar ever because sugar's bad, and grandpa doesn't even care. He's like, forget what mom says. Have some sugar, baby. Come on, where the grandpa's at? Like, you know what I'm talking about. Like, you take your grandbaby shopping, and you can just buy that baby anything she looks at, right? Looks at it, smiles at it, you're buying it. Come on, and dad's got to pay for everything else going on in that baby's life, so we can't necessarily do that, but you can. And recently, I want to rag on my dad a little bit, who Pastor Mark, also my mom, Pastor Joy, they're both staff pastors here. But my daughter calls my dad Pop. Look at your neighbor and say, Pop. Pop. Now look at your other neighbor and say, Juju. Juju. That's what she calls my mom. So my dad, Pop, my daughter, her and I are at my dad's house this past week, and my dad decides that he is going to teach my daughter how to pillow fight. How many of you all have ever been in a pillow fight before, right? Okay, if you've never been in a pillow fight before, I don't know what to tell you. You're just not living. You should do that today, okay? So Pop decides that he's going to teach my daughter Grace how to pillow fight. So he takes her, puts her on the bed, he calls in my sister, Caroline, and they have a pillow fight. And they probably, no joke, they're doing this for 45 minutes. I mean, my daughter is loving every minute of it. I mean, she's got that like baby belly laugh that you just, come on, how many of you all, you know what I'm talking about? You can't just get enough of it. And which is great and awesome. And go grandpa for teaching her that. But I got to take that baby home. Come on. Now, where the dads and moms at in here, right? Like I got to take these new habits back to the house, right? So we take Grace home, and now whenever Grace sees a bed or whenever Grace sees a pillow, what do you think she wants to do, right? Like, she only wants to pillow fight. Now, she says, Biba fight, right? Like, so she'll look at me and she'll say, Dada, Biba fight, right? And then, of course, because mom's teaching her manners, she's like, peace, right? So the other day, Shauna decides to leave me at home with the baby, which how many of y'all know that in and of itself is a little risky, right? So, she leaves me at home flying solo on dad duty. And Grace comes up and she's like, Dad, bebop fight, peas. And I'm like, all right, I want to be fun dad. So I stick her and I put her on the bed. And it takes everything that she's got just to pick one of those pillows up. I mean, she's like picking it up and she's holding it and she's trying to pillow fight. So I grab a pillow and I start hitting her with the pillow. And what I notice is she's got pretty good balance. She's almost 2, but come on, she's a big baby. She's like the 95th percentile for her age. I mean, she's just tall, big baby. And so she's keeping her balance and I'm hitting her. So I just start whacking her a little bit harder with the pillow, right? I mean, she's like, she's like loving it. And so I'm like, okay, well, I want to knock her over like it's pillow fight, right? So yeah, y'all know where this is going, right? So I grab that pillow and I wind back, right? Like I wind up, right? And I just whack her with the pillow. She goes flying off the bed, right? I kid you not, right? I mean, hits the floor and she starts losing her mind. I mean, she's crying. Come on, how many of y'all know? When she started losing her mind, come on. Dad started losing his mind. I mean, I'm freaking out. I pick up Grace. I'm holding her in one hand. I'm calling mom and I'm freaking out. And I'm freaking out not because I'm worried if Grace is hurt or not. Come on, I'm freaking out because I'm wondering what mom's going to do to me when Mama Shauna finds out that I knocked her baby off the bed with a pillow. I mean, I'm on the phone with Shanae and I'm like, girl, you got to come home. She's like, why? I'm like, your baby fell off the bed. She's like, how? I'm like, I forget. I'll tell you, maybe we'll talk about it later. I don't know. I'm like, you just need to come home. And before you get upset, though, I mean, like about 5 minutes later, she's laughing again and asking to bebop fight again. And, I'm still kind of like, what just happened, right? And what's funny is, during that moment, I was freaking out. But looking back now, that's kind of funny for me, that memory that I share with you guys. But if I can be totally honest with you, there are times in my life where I've had problems and I've had situations that caused me to freak out a little bit. And those problems, they gave way to fear, they gave way to worry. And ultimately, that fear and that worry didn't just go away, but it gave birth to anxiety. And really what I want to do today is I want to talk to you about the topic of anxiety. And really, I come to you today with a pastor's heart. And that is that I've been working at this church now for about 8 years. And I have had probably in the last year and a half, 2 years, I have had probably hundreds of conversations with students, with moms and dads, with older people, with middle-aged people, with single people, with so many people here at our church that would say that their lives are absolutely crippled by the anxiety that they are experiencing. And when Randy came to me and asked me to share with you all this weekend, it's almost like I felt the Holy Spirit tell me right away that this was the topic that I needed to address. And what I want to do real quick is I want to define anxiety for you so we can all have a mutual understanding. And so you can write this down. Here's how I want to define anxiety for you today. It's an abnormal and overwhelming sense of apprehension and fear. An abnormal and overwhelming sense of apprehension and fear. And if you're taking notes, I want you to write down that word, overwhelming, because we're going to come back to that in just a moment. But I started to look into this topic of anxiety, and here's some of the things that I found. In August of 2018, Barnes & Noble, which is the largest book retailer in the United States, just announced a huge surge in the sales of books on anxiety. A 25% jump from June of 2017. One of their senior executives says this: "We may be living in a, quote, anxious nation." Another senior executive at Barnes & Noble says this: the anxiety category has really popped in the last year as book buyers look for practical guides and strategies on how to manage anxiety. Today, anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the United States. Listen to this: affecting 40 million adults, 1 in 5 people. The World Health Organization says that globally 300 million people have an anxiety disorder. And that's just the people that will admit it. And here's something that I thought was interesting. Recently, Arizona State University conducted a study about distress and resilience among both well-off and disadvantaged teenagers. Here's what they found. Listen to this. They found that privileged teenagers that would seemingly have everything going for them, everything that they need, lacking no material lack. Here's what they found. Listen to this. That they are among the most emotionally distressed people in our country. Isn't that incredible? And so really what I want to do today is I want to talk to you, and I've entitled my message today, what do you do when anxiety attacks? What do we do when anxiety attacks? Now, before we dive into this, there are 2 things that I want to just tell you right off the bat. The first is this, is that I am not an expert in the topic of anxiety. Nor am I going to take the next few moments and try to convince you that I am. But though I am not an expert on it, I am also not a stranger to struggling with it. And the second thing I want to let you know is that if you're here today and you would feel like I'm struggling with anxiety, the best thing that you can do is make the decision that you are not going to struggle with it alone. And listen to me, church, we have got to remove, before you start clapping, I need you to hear this. We have got to remove the stigma on struggling with anxiety and other mental health disorders. Because the reality is that when there's a stigma on something like that, it prevents people from opening up and talking about it and really getting the help that they need. And the reality is that if you're going through something today, I want to encourage you, if you don't hear anything else in this message, hear this, that you do not need to struggle with that alone. But I want to encourage you, listen, and I also want to say that if you're new to Bayside, like this is your first weekend here and you would feel like maybe you're struggling with this, you're not going to find a better church in this country to walk through something like that at. Because the reality is here at Bayside, we're not just about being a friendly church that high-fives you and gives you free coffee on Sunday mornings. No, we're about being a church where you can find friends. And as we're talking about these things today, I just want to encourage you, if anything we're talking about rings true with you, as it has rung true for me at times in my life, that I want to encourage you to take the next step right after service, go up to our prayer team, let them know what you're going through, let them know how they can be praying for you. Our prayer team members will be at the front of our stage right after service, as well as in our Connect Center at all of our locations. I also want to encourage you to get in our growth track. You can get in My Freedom. And the reality is when you get into My Freedom, you're going to learn so many ways that God's called you to walk in freedom. But the key is that you're going to be able to do it with other people. And let me tell you something, as a pastor and as a leader at this church, one of the best decisions you can make in your life, I would actually say it's the best decision you can make beyond salvation and choosing the right person to marry. And that is choosing to link arms with another believer and not only walking through the good times in your life, come on somebody, but walking with them through the bad times in your life as well. And so if you're here and you're struggling with anxiety today, let me just tell you that that's okay. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that there's something weird about you. It just means that you're human like the rest of us. And actually, if you're struggling with anxiety today, the great thing is that you have something in common with someone that we would consider to be a biblical hero. And his name was the Apostle Paul. And what I want to do today as we dive into this is I want to read some of the things that Paul wrote about the anxiety that he was struggling with. But before we get into that, at the core of what anxiety ultimately wants to do, and I want you to write this down in your notes, is what the enemy wants to use the anxiety in your life to do is to cause you to worship a problem. You see, the problem is not that you struggle with anxiety or don't struggle with anxiety. The problem is when the anxiety in your life causes you to worship the problem that's causing the anxiety. Because ultimately what the enemy would love to do is for you to take your eyes off of Jesus, take your eyes off of the one who sustains you, the one who loves you, the one whose strength that you can lean on, and to put your eyes, your energy, and your focus off of him and onto a problem. And the Apostle Paul actually kind of describes how this started to happen in his own life. And what I want to do today is I want to read you a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote in what many theologians and scholars believe to be AD 56. And he was traveling through the region of Macedonia, and he actually wrote a second letter to a church that he had helped start in Corinth. And Paul writes this second letter that you and I now have in our Bibles today as the book of 2 Corinthians. And I want to read you how Paul describes his emotional state of mind. Let's listen to this together. Here it is. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 1, and we're going to start right here in verse number 8. It says, "We think you ought to know, dear brothers and sisters," listen to this, "about the trouble we went through in the province of Asia." Now I want to pause for just a moment. What's interesting to me is that the Bible is not specific about the kind of trouble that Paul was experiencing. But here's the reality. If you take some time and you go and you study Paul's life, you read the book of Acts and you reference other books in the New Testament, you'll see that Paul experienced so many different types of problems. He was physically beaten. He had friends that just abandoned him. He had problem with local authorities. He had physical ailments that he was going through, and he had all sorts of emotional distress as well. And the reason I tell you that is just to say that there is a good chance that though Paul lived in AD 56, he could sympathize with almost everything you're experiencing right now. And so the Apostle Paul says, look, I had lots of trouble. Then here's how he described what he felt as he went through that. Listen very closely. We were crushed and, let's say it together, overwhelmed. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Listen to how he describes it. We were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure. In other words, I'm crushed and overwhelmed, and it's so much, it's more than I can endure. Now listen to what he says. And we thought we would never live through it. You know, a lot of scholars and theologians believe that Paul not only actively struggled with anxiety, but that he also went through seasons of depression, and some theologians believe he even struggled with suicide at different times. Here's what he says. Listen to this. In fact, here it is, we expected to die. But, now pay attention. Here's what he says. As a result, okay, so we felt like that, we experienced that, but as a result, here's what he said. We stopped relying on ourselves and learned to rely only on God, who raises the dead. Here's what he says. He says, and he did rescue us from mortal danger. Come on, somebody. And he will rescue us again. We have placed our confidence not in ourselves, but in him, and he will continue to rescue us. Come on. And ultimately, church, that is my prayer for you. And I just want to be the first to tell you that I don't have all the answers about what you're going through. But my prayer for you is that as you walk out of these doors today, that will be your response. That you will just make a commitment to continue to go through life, not relying on your strength, on your ability, but relying on Jesus and what he's done for you in the past, what he can do for you now. Come on, church, and what Jesus is going to do for you in the future. And you know what I love about the Apostle Paul is the Apostle Paul doesn't just give us this vague, like, hey, I learned how to not rely on myself, but to rely on God. But actually, 6 years later, as Paul was under house arrest in AD 62, he's actually under house arrest by the Roman government. he writes another letter to a church in Philippi. Paul loved to write letters. It's the most of the New Testament that you have today. And when he writes this letter in AD 62, he actually describes what he does when he feels anxiety and experiences his anxiety in his life. And I just want to take the next few moments and give you Paul's advice on what to do when we experience anxiety. Here we go. This is out of Philippians chapter 4, and we're going to start in verse 6. He says, "Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything you can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all you learned and received from me, everything you heard from me and saw me doing, and here's the key. Then the God of peace will be with you." Here we go. Paul's 3 different ways that we deal with anxiety. Number 1 is we've got to pray about everything. Come on, look at your neighbor and say everything, everything. You know, I love that the Bible doesn't say that we only need to pray about the really bad things in life or the really good things in life or the in-between things. Paul says, no. We've got to pray about everything. And it also breaks that into 2 different segments, if you will. It says we need to pray and tell God what we need. I love this verse out of 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. It says, "Give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you." We need to tell God everything that's going on. What the enemy would love for you to believe is that God does not care about the details of your life. But listen to me, church. If he didn't care about the details of your life, why would he tell you to pray about them? The Apostle Paul says you got to pray about everything. Then the second thing he says we need to do is we need to thank God for everything that he's done. And he doesn't just say, hey, we thank God about 1 or 2 things we've done. He says, no, you got to thank God for, come on, all that he's done. And if you're experiencing anxiety, I would say that a good practice for you would be to sit down and start thanking God for everything he's done in your life. And I got to tell you, if you start going over all the things that God has done in your life, I'm telling you, you're going to get up out of that chair and feel differently than when you sat down. But here's the reality. Some of you may be here today and you'd be like, you know, I struggle in my prayer life a little bit. I really don't feel like I'm a prayer warrior, right? And I would just say that's okay. I honestly would not really consider myself much of a prayer warrior either. I lay down at night with my wife and we do our nightly prayers and it goes something like this. I'll usually start, I'll be like, God, give us a stronger marriage and help us to sleep good. And Father, I beseech thee, help our daughter to sleep in past 5 a.m. tomorrow morning, because if she doesn't, mom and dad are going to lose their mind. Amen, right? Prayer's over. Then I turn it over to my wife, right? Now, if you ever pray with someone that is about to pray really long, come on, you guys are going to know this. Come on, how many of you know they take a deep breath before they get started, right? I turn it over to Sean and she's like, dear Jesus, right? I mean, she just goes into it. I mean, we go from our nightly prayers to a prayer service in our room. She's using those cool Christian words that I don't even understand. Come on. And the reality is, come on, how many of y'all know I sleep good, but I also think, man, I'm not so good at praying, right? And the reality is, here's my encouragement to you, is that if you want to have a better prayer life, you need to get around some people that have an awesome prayer life. The reality is, listen to me, I walk so many people through this, and that is you're experiencing anxiety and troubles in your life, and the people that you're talking to about those things, they're not even talking to God about that. And the reality is you're talking to them about your anxiety. They're not giving any of that to God. They're not giving any of their own problems to God. So your anxiety becomes their anxiety, and their anxiety feeds into your anxiety, and you're worse off than you were before you talked to them. The reality is, listen, if you want a better prayer life, you need to get around people that pray more. And not only so that they can help you pray more, listen to me, church, so that they can pray for you. I remember this one time I went to the gym, and I'll just be really transparent with you. I was sitting in the office at my house, and I was having I was replaying something in my mind that I thought was going to be happening to Shauna and I, and I started to panic about it, and so I was like, okay, I got to get out of the house. So I went to the gym. I get to the gym, I sit on the bench. I'm about to do bench press. I put 350 on the rack to rep out. That's a joke. For those of you that believe that, I love you. We should definitely be friends. Okay. I sit there, and literally I cannot stop worrying about this pending, just felt like doom that was coming. And really, I mean, I felt myself, and if you've experienced this before, you know what I'm saying. I felt myself just like panicking, where I almost like I couldn't do much. I couldn't think straight. I definitely couldn't work out. So I just get up off the bench. I get in my car. I start driving. I have no idea what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go. I'm like, I can't go home. I'm just driving. I call Pastor Bernard. He puts me on speaker in his car, and his wife, Queen Elizabeth, is there in the car as well. And I start telling them kind of what's going on and what I'm worried about. And if you've ever had Queen Elizabeth pray over you before, you know what's about to happen, right? So, I mean, she doesn't even like let me finish, right? She just is like, cuts that off, and she just starts praying over me, and she just starts reminding me that I am not my source, but that God is my source, that the problem in my life is not going to become bigger than the voice of God in my life, than the comfort of the Holy Spirit in my life. Come on, church. She just starts reminding me that God is my source, and as I'm just driving around in circles, I feel myself start to calm down. And some of you are walking through anxiety, and it's never going to get better because you're never going to talk to the right people about it. And I'm telling you, listen to me, church, you've got to have people in your life that you can go to with these things, and they're not going to point you back to you, and they're not going to point you back to themselves, because a lot of times they don't have answers either, but they're going to point you to God. Come on, church, we got to get around people that are praying more. Here's the second thing that we need to do. The second thing that we need to do is we need to fix our thoughts. Paul says we need to fix our thoughts on what is true and honorable, and he goes on and describes these other things as well. You know, when my daughter was about 1.5 years old, somebody gave her a waffle for the first time. It may have been Dad, but we won't go there. Okay. So gives her a waffle with some syrup. And ever since she had that waffle for the first time, she has been obsessed with waffles. And she calls them foffles with an F. Come on, somebody, look at your neighbor and say, foffle. And if any of you ever teach her to say waffle regularly, I will be very upset with you. Okay, so foffle, right? Come on, she loves foffle house. The girl loves foffles. And we'd put her in her crib at night, and we'd sit there and listen to her, and we could literally hear her in her crib getting ready to go to bed, and she'd be like, foffle. I mean, she's counting foffles going to sleep, right? She wakes up in the morning, runs into our room, Dad, Mama, eat, foffle, peace. You know, lunchtime comes around, guess what she wants? A foffle, right? I mean, the girl loved foffles. And if I can be totally honest with you, there's been a lot of times where I could take the foffle out of that story and I could put the problems in it. For me, I lay my head down on my pillow at night, and all that's racing through my head, the problems that I'm going through, the trouble I'm experiencing. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this person says this? What if this person does this? What if my car breaks down? What if this happens? I mean, it's just over again. I wake up in the morning, guess what? The troubles and the problems racing through my mind, racing through my head. And you know, the Apostle Paul, I love that the Apostle Paul doesn't just say, hey guys, think good thoughts. Like, thanks, Paul, right? Like, gotcha, buddy, right? Like, he doesn't just say think good thoughts. No, the Apostle Paul tells us what to do when we think bad thoughts as well. Listen to this, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, a little later in the same book that we had just read. He says this, he says that we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. Here it is. And we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. Here's the reality, is some of us need to audit our thought life. And the reality is that so many people in today's day and age, we are just readily accepting every negative and destructive thought that runs through our heads. And the reality is often when we're experiencing anxiety, we're replaying and repeating negative, destructive thoughts over and over and over again in our minds. But the Apostle Paul says, no, we take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Listen to what Isaiah 26 says. It says, you will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you. Listen to this. All whose thoughts are fixed on you. And what I've learned in my own life and what I would encourage you to do is when you are constantly thinking about your troubles, constantly thinking about your problems, and those things often are what gives birth to the anxiety that we experience. We need to learn to get our eyes off of the troubles and the problems, though they are there, and I am not diminishing them, but we need to learn to get our eyes off of the problems and get our eyes, our minds, and our hearts onto Jesus, the Prince of Peace, the Lord of Lords, the one who says, I will be with you always, even till the end of the age. We've got to learn to get our thoughts off of our problems and to get our hearts and our minds on to Jesus. And the final thing that we need to do is we need to do it again. We need to do it again. Here's what I mean by that. Let's listen to these final thoughts from Paul. Verse number 9, he says, keep putting into practice all you learned and received from me, everything you heard from me and saw me doing, then the God of peace will be with you. And I love that the Apostle Paul says that, because if I can be totally honest with you, there have been so many times in my life where I've been going through things, experiencing anxiety, and I'm praying about it. I'm trying to set my mind on the Lord. I'm doing everything that I think I'm supposed to do. And if I can be totally honest with you, the circumstances didn't change, and my emotions a lot of times did not change. And if I can be honest with you, I was like, man, do I keep praying? Do I keep trying to put my mind on the Lord? I mean, do I keep doing this stuff? Because it feels like it's not working. And if I can be honest with you guys, I think so many times, so many of us feel like that, because when we do these things, sometimes I think we are expecting the wrong things from God. Let me explain to you like this. Sometimes we're praying about things, the troubles that we're facing, or we're going through this, and we're expecting that God's going to give us like a circumstantial fix. Or we think that God's going to give us some type of like temporary emotional change. And let me just be the first one to tell you as a pastor, I hope your circumstances change. And I will pray for that with you, man. I hope your marriage gets better. I hope your kids get better. I hope your boss stops being mean to you. I hope your car doesn't break down. I hope your financial situation changes. Man, like, I hope those things change. But the reality is, as long as you and I are living and breathing on this place called earth, things may not work out the way that we hope that they will. In fact, if you go and you read about the lives of most of the disciples, the people that followed Jesus, when they put their faith in Jesus, their lives progressively actually got worse. And so how do we deal with that? Here's what the Apostle Paul says. He says, look, listen to what he says. He says, you keep putting into practice all these things, everything you've heard from me and you've seen me doing. Then the God of peace will give you a circumstantial fix. Nope. Then the God of peace will give you the emotion of peace. Nope. Then the God of peace will give you something temporary. Nope. Listen to what he says. He says, keep doing these things. Then the God of peace will be with you. And here's what I got to tell you is that in my own life, something that I've learned, and so many of you have experienced this as well, is I'm so tired of waiting on a circumstantial fix to change my mood. Because I got to tell you, if you're waiting on your circumstances to change, life will let you down every time. But the reality is, listen to this, and you can go, and I put this verse at the bottom of your notes. There are so many times in Paul's life where Paul, just like you and I, he begged Jesus, take this thing out of my life. And Jesus said, look, I'm not going to change your situation, but I am going to give you more of myself. And here's something you have to understand about the peace of God, church, is the peace of God is not like when you and I are going through something and we need peace. It's not like Jesus goes to like the celestial Walmart and finds peace there and it's on BOGO, so he gets you two and comes and gives it to you. No. Peace is not separate from God. Peace is the essence of God. And so listen to me, church, as you're going through these things, and as you're dealing with these circumstances, and you're talking to God, and you're thinking about God, though those things may not be changing, what is happening is God is with you. He's walking with you. And the more of God you have, the more peace you have, because God is peace. And listen to me, church, I got to tell you that I need something that's better than just a circumstantial fix. Because can I be honest with you about life? As soon as one problem's gone, sometimes it feels like another problem comes. Sometimes, come on, doesn't it feel like we're either in trouble, about to go through trouble, or just coming out of trouble, right? I mean, it's like, there's always something. There's always something. And can I be honest with you? What I need is not a circumstantial fix or a temporary emotional fix, as my emotions change just like yours do. But I need something that transcends my circumstances. I need someone that transcends the way I feel. Come on, I need someone that doesn't have peace separate from them. I need the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Come on, He is the Prince of Peace. And I don't know what you're walking through today, but my prayer for you is that you'll leave this place with your eyes on Jesus and resting, not in your ability. Just like Paul said, I'm not relying on myself anymore. No. I'm relying on Him. Let me pray for you wherever you're watching this. I want to ask you to close your eyes and bow your heads. And what I want to do right now is I just want to ask you, with no one looking around right now, a totally private moment. And if you're here today and you would say, Joe, you're speaking to me. I'm walking through something. I'm struggling with anxiety. Maybe you're struggling with depression, or maybe you've even been having thoughts of that you're losing the value in your life, and maybe you're even struggling with some suicidal thoughts today. And if that's you under the sound of my voice, with no one looking around, this isn't about your neighbor, this is about you and God. If you would say, Joe, that's me, I just want to pray with you. Would you just put your hand up and put it right back down? Say, that's me. Hands up all over this room, all over this room. You can put your hands back down. If that's you and you just raised your hand, or you wanted to raise your hand, I'm going to pray over you, and I want you to receive this. God, I thank you for every person under the sound of my voice. And I come to you, Jesus, right now, and I come against the anxiety that people are feeling, the depression that people are walking through. I rebuke suicidal thoughts in the name of Jesus. Jesus, I pray that as people leave this room, that they will not only experience an emotional difference, but that they will experience the Prince of Peace, that your peace and your strength will rest on their shoulders. And that as they go back to their jobs and their families, Jesus, that you will reveal yourself more to them, and that you will wrap your arms around them. In Jesus' name, amen.